By now, you should be able to do this bell problem. Evaluate the expression when x, you're given a value for x. Remember, plug in to where you see an x and evaluate. This one's really easy. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6, plus 1 and we get negative 5. We are finally onto the good stuff. We're at 2.3 linear functions in slope-intercept form, meaning we're going to finally start graphing some lines. Okay, the objectives, by the end of this lesson, you'll have to graph and write linear equations. Some vocab terms for you to write down. Slope, the ratio of the vertical change to the horizontal change between 2 points. Remember, vertical is like a ladder, goes straight up and down, and horizontal is like the horizon, goes straight across. Y-intercept is the point at which the line crosses the y-axis. So remember, we have our x and our y-axes. Our y is the vertical axis, and it'd be any point that sits on the y-axis, and that means our x value is 0 because we aren't going left and right of it. So we have 0, and we'll have any number for our y. And then the same thing goes for our x-intercept, except we're going to be on the x-axis. Draw it up here. And it'll be any number on our x-axis. And it means our y value is 0 because we're not going up and down off of our x-axis. And the last one is slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. M is your slope, and we'll go over the formula for that in a little bit. So m is your slope, and b is your y-intercept, so the point at which it hits the y-axis. It is very important to remember that b is the y-intercept. Means we start up and down on the up and down axis. We do not start on the x. If you do that, I will mark your whole problem wrong. So be your y-intercept for b. Alright, so slope of a line can be represented a couple different ways. You can use points on your graph. So we'll have 2 points. We'll have y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Again, notice how we have a point here on our line, and our x value goes first, and our y value goes second. And we have another point on the line, again represented with x2 and y2. You can find the slope of any line given 2 points, or if it's already given to you on graph paper where you can count the grids in between and these points lie on the crossing of the 2 coordinates, you can use rise over run, meaning counting up and then over. So the first one, you have to determine the slope of this ramp, and it has a rise of 15 inches. So rise meaning we're going up and down, so our rise is 15. Our run, or the distance we go horizontally, is 54. And we have to determine the slope. So remember, slope equals, or m, equals your rise over your run. And our rise is 15. And our run is 54. Now, if we were to graph this, that would be a very big slope. So always look to see if you can reduce the slope at all to get smaller numbers. And you can reduce it. They're both divisible by 3. So we'll get 5 over 18 as our slope. Again, always, always, always reduce your slope. So the slope of our skateboard ramp is 5 over 18. Now they may give us 2 points on our line, and we have to figure out the slope of our line. It might be helpful to label your points. Take your first point. Remember, your first term is x, and your second term is y, so we'll have x1, y1. And then our second point, we'll have x2, y2. And then all you have to do is plug it into the formula of slope equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now remember, it is always the difference of your y's over the difference of your x's. So plug it in. Our y2, go up here, what do we label y2, which is negative 1, minus y1, which is 3, over, go find x2, which is 2, minus, and x1 is negative 1. Now be careful on the bottom. Remember, minus and minus becomes plus. And then we simplify. Go to the top. Negative 1 minus 3, which is negative 4. And 2 plus 1 is 3. Since this cannot be reduced, we leave it in improper fraction form. And our slope is negative 4/3. Now, use this tree to help you classify the different types of lines that we get depending on the slope that we have. So starting with the easiest one, the positive slope, that means our line is going to rise. So we'll have a positive slope and our line will rise. If you look at the right side of our graph, notice how it's in the positive direction. That will help you. And if you look at the negative slope, and again we look at the right side of our graph, it is in the negative part, or going down, so it's falling. So the opposite of rise is fall. Then we look at zero slope, which is our horizontal. I'm not going to spell it horizontal, I'm just going to put H-O-R-I-Z for horizontal. Now, when you have a zero slope, that means you have a 0 on top and any number on the bottom, which then reduces to, because when you divide 0 by any number, you get 0. Do not forget to do that on your test and quiz. You have to reduce it all the way to 0 to get full points. Our last type of slope is undefined slope, which gives us a vertical line. And to have an undefined slope, that means you are dividing by 0, so you have any number on top, and you're dividing by 0. Since you cannot divide by 0, to classify this slope, you must write undefined. Do not just leave it in this form here. You have to write undefined to receive all of your points. So we have 4 different sets of points on our lines. Go ahead and plug it into your formula for slope, which remember is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Pause this, come back, and we will go over the answers. Alright, for A, you should have got a slope of 0. Remember to reduce it all the way to 0. And to classify this, that is a horizontal line. Moving on to B, you should get negative 1/2 for your slope. Since it is negative, that means our line is falling. For C, you should get a positive 5/6 as your slope. And since it is positive, that means our line is rising. And the last one, D, you should get an undefined slope. So we got to write out undefined, meaning we had a 0 on the bottom. And that gives us a vertical line. Again, don't forget to write out undefined, and for your 0 slope, you need to reduce it all the way to 0. Do not leave it 0 over a number. Alright, finally into graphing our equation of a line. This is the most common, y equals mx plus b. We already talked about the slope and the y-intercept. Slope is where we move our point, and b is where we start our graph. Remember, on the y-intercept, the vertical axis. And we can also talk about, from our vocab, our x-intercept and y-intercept. Again, for your x-intercept, we're going to be on the x-axis. We'll have any number for x, and your y will always be 0. And then flip it for your y-intercept. Since we'll be on the y-axis, that means our x value will be 0. Alright, so before we get to graphing our lines, we need to actually write an equation of a line. This one is easy. We can already plug it into our form, y equals mx plus b. since they give us our slope, and if they notice, they already gave us our y-intercept of -3 since our x is 0. So you just got to plug it in. Y equals our slope, which is m, is 1/5. Make sure you write it like a fraction like this. That will help us later. Don't forget your x. And then plus b, but since it's minus, we can just write -3. And that is the equation of our line. For b, notice how they give it to us in graph form. We can easily identify our y-intercept since it hits our y-axis at 4. So we can already plug that in. So we have y equals, we don't know what our slope is quite yet, so leave it blank. You'll always have an x. And since we started our graph at 4, and it's in the positive direction, we'll have +4 at the end for our b, or our y-intercept. Now, to determine our slope, find 2 points on your graph that intersect at a point where they intersect completely. And then we have to use our rise over run, or you count from one point to the other, going up and down first, and left and right second. So I'm going to start at my point here and work my way down to my second point. I go down 1, down 2, and down 3. So that is my rise. I went down 3, so that makes it negative. Anytime we go down, it's negative. And then I go to the right 1, and anytime we go to the right, that is positive. So the equation of our line is y equals -3x plus 4. Alright, moving on to our graphs. This is my favorite part. Okay, so when we are graphing lines, remember the form y equals mx plus b. If you notice for a, there is nothing added or subtracted at the end. Since that is the case, we can do one of two things. We can always know that if there's nothing added or subtracted, we start at 0, or put that +0 at the end because it doesn't change our equation, and then that will help us remember that we start at 0. The next step to graphing lines is to then look at your slope. If it is not in fraction form, put it in fraction form. So take your whole number and put it over 1. Remember, slope is rise over run. So we go up 2, and then our run is 1. So we go up 2 over 1, plot your point, and do a couple of those. Up 2 over 1, plot your point. Up 2 over 1, and plot your point. Now, might want to write this down. Whenever you move up, that is positive. Whenever you move down, or abbreviate that with D, that is negative. Anytime you move right, represented with R, that is positive. And anytime you move left, that is negative. Now, if you notice, we have a positive slope, and we went up and to the right. There is another way to move our points. Since a negative divided by negative is positive, we can also move down 2 and to the left 1. Down 2 and to the left 1. Down 2 and to the left 1. Now that we have all of our points graphed, use a straight edge, a ruler, or a piece of paper, connect all of your points, and we are done. You have now graphed your first line. 4b, notice how we have something added or subtracted from our x variable. So that means this is where we start our graph. Always look at the number added or subtracted at the end to start your graph. Now, y-intercept. Y. Look, it is labeled for you. It is the y-axis. So we start on the y-axis at 3. Do not start it on x. Please, do not. Okay? Then we look at the number out front of x. Notice how there's no number there. So you can replace that with 1 over 1, since we want to make it a fraction. And go up 1 over 1, plot your points, up 1 over 1, plot your points, and we can go down and to the left, down and to the left. Once you plot all your points, draw your line. Don't forget to put arrows on the end, and we are done. This next one I'm going to have you graph by yourself. Don't forget where to start on the graph and how to properly use your slope. Notice how it is negative this time, so our line should be falling, which means it should end up over here when we are finished. So don't forget, we're starting at -1 on the y. We have a negative slope, so we go down 2 to the right 3, down 2 to the right 3, or you can go up 2 and to the left 3. Any different way combination to get a negative slope. In our last example, we have to write an equation in slope-intercept form. Don't forget, slope-intercept form is y equals. So we need to get our y term by itself, which means we add or subtract our x term over. Since it is positive, we subtract it to the other side. So we have minus 5x. Notice how I cannot combine my 16 and negative 5x because 16 does not have an x. So I'm left with negative 4y equals, and I'm going to write my x term first because remember our slope goes first so we don't get all of our points mixed up. So we have negative 5x plus 16. And then our next step is to get y by itself. It's being multiplied by negative 4. So we need to divide both sides and the entire side by negative 4. Those are gone. We get y equals, now don't forget negative divided by negative is positive, so I have a positive 5/4 x, and then we have 16 divided by negative 4, we get negative 4. This is our equation of our line in slope-intercept form. The last step is to identify the slope in the y-intercept. Remember, your slope is in front of your x, so our slope is 5/4. And the number where we start our graph at is at the end, it's added or subtracted, so our y-intercept is negative 4. And this is the first lesson of graphing lines. This should have been review, but if it is not, go ahead and go back through this presentation and review graphing lines.